welcome to tonight's webinar on Shoutcaster Essentials. Today's webinar is brought to you by the South Australian Commissioner for Children and Young People and the Australian Esports League. Before we begin, we'd like to respectfully acknowledge and celebrate the traditional owners of the lands throughout South Australia, and we pay our respect to their elders and to past, present and future generations of their children and young people. My name is Domino and I am your host for this evening. I am joined by a very special guest for tonight, welcoming AVRL. Welcome to tonight.
Hey, how's it going? Happy to be here.
Now, AVRL is a professional broadcaster of 4 years. He's been featured on international esports events such as the Intel Extreme Masters, Melbourne Esports Open, and the Overwatch League. So AVRL has a wealth of knowledge to share with us this evening, so I hope you are ready for it. Just so you are aware, we're going to have some question answer time at the end of tonight's webinar. So if you do have any questions, drop them into the chat here. We'll collect them all and then we'll have them ready at the end to go through them. So anything you'd like to know about shoutcasting, drop those questions in the chat. For now, I'm going to hand over to AVRL and he's going to talk to us all about shoutcasting. So over to you, AVRL. Oh, I just got to get us all set up. Okay, over to you.
Cool, no worries. Thank you very much, Domino. Yeah, shoutcasting, what do we got here? This is a very interesting sort of niche in esports right now. So, I'm assuming if you're here, you have a bit of a general idea of what esports is and what's been happening in the past few years, the past 5 years, maybe even up to a decade, of where esports has come from and how we've progressed and where it is now in terms of its popularity and, its interest across a whole range of demographics and a whole bunch of people who really love gaming and the competitive side of gaming. So, where we sort of look at here for esports, I guess an introduction to myself, first of all, of where I'm at in terms of all of this and, why I'm here to speak to you all. And what am I doing? What I've been doing in the space is I am a member of broadcast talent, and specifically, I'm probably most well known for doing shoutcasting. And that is the commentary side of esports broadcast. But esports broadcast is a pretty major, big engine that has a lot of moving parts. If you sort of look at what you've got on your screen right now, this is from the Melbourne Esports Open. This was the contenders grand finals for the Australian region. So the best teams in Australia finishing off their season, playing their finals, the semi-finals and the grand finals on a major stage in front of 2,000 people, broadcast to the world. And it was probably one of the biggest events that we've had among the Australian audience for Australian esports. Among that, we've also had the Intel Extreme Masters, we've had the Australian Open for Fortnite as well. So these kind of events are basically the biggest of the lot for this region. If you sort of look towards where that stage is, right in the middle, right in front of the whole crowd there, you can start to see maybe there's like a little desk right to the left there. That is where the broadcast talent is. And that is where I'm standing as well for the purposes of what I did for this particular event. So I worked alongside a group of very talented people from ESL. And there I am on the far left there, right in front of the stage, and broadcasted out on Twitch to the world. And it is an exhilarating, fantastic event to work at in front of a lot of people. Really great event. And just an insanely good experience. So this is a kind of a job and a career that has been able to take me to a lot of places. I've worked a lot of different events in different countries, obviously in Auckland where I'm from, but I've had experience working in Sydney, Melbourne, Bangkok, Shanghai, Seoul, and potential other opportunities in the future as well. So there's a lot of international stuff out there for the people that have done well. And across all the different disciplines of games as well. I've been predominantly doing Overwatch. I'm currently doing Valorant. I've done Call of Duty in the past, done a little bit of League of Legends, done a little bit of Hearthstone as well. Worked the big events like Domino Jack just mentioned as well. So, I've been around different places to work with a whole bunch of different people and different types of events and experience a lot of different cultures there as well. So that's kind of where I've been coming from. And for the past 4 years, it's basically what I've been doing in esports. And even before that, I think I started shoutcasting as early as 2011. So even before professionally doing it for an actual paycheck and for actual pay, and making a living off of it, being able to do it as an amateur, just out of the love for it, being a big fan of esports myself, coming from a player back in the day, transitioning into broadcast talent, where it was something I was very interested in anyway. Um, you know, learning broadcast and communications in university definitely helped with that. It was something that was sort of in tune with my interests as well. So, the things that I was really interested in growing up in terms of both gaming and broadcasting being put together for me, working in shoutcasting and broadcast commentary and just as broadcast talent in general was very key to, where my interests lie and how I can marry up all the things that I enjoy the most. But let's talk about what is broadcast commentary a little bit more. Let's talk about what the job actually is and what this kind of involves, and for the people that have the interest about it or just curious about what we sort of do. Because typically, if you tune into an esports broadcast, all you're really looking at is you are looking at first of all, you may be hearing some voices. You hear the voices over the gameplay, over your favorite matches, your favorite teams and players. You may see the broadcasters as well when they're on camera, and you get to really get a feel for their personalities. And that's kind of it. From the front-facing side, that's really what you are looking at. But working as broadcast talent it's pretty broad, actually. Shoutcasting is actually only one of many different roles that you can have within a broadcast talent team. You have people across different roles, such as hosting, that can be on a desk host or as a stage host. You are looking at people who are analysts that can work on a desk. You're looking at people who are interviewers, perhaps, or they're people working, sideline reporters working to speak to the people involved in terms of the players of the teams, or speaking to audience members, working with the crowd and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of different people there, and that is only the front-facing side of it as well. We'll get into it a little bit later, but we'll talk, a little bit later about the other parts of the broadcast that are all quite relevant to what's happening with shoutcasting. But as far as shoutcasting goes and the broadcast talent side, that's basically the kind of people that work in the industry. A lot of these people come from different backgrounds as well. We're talking about people that were mainly, especially if you are from the analyst side of things, you're talking about mainly people who have a love for the game as a, first and foremost. And then second to that, you have people that have a lot of interest in wanting to do broadcasts, wanting to put themselves on a microphone, wanting to put themselves on camera, show off their personality, show off their love for the game as well. You're talking about people who have been involved in esports as an ex-player, an ex-professional in some sort of other esports role. They could have been a coach as well. You could be talking about people that they may be coming in through some more mainstream means. I know of people where you have broadcast talent from more mainstream media wanting to get into esports as broadcast talent as well, whether that be commentary for traditional sports or working in other roles within sports or journalism or anything alongside those. So those are also the different kinds of people that you get to work with and meet in the industry. And of those, we kind of look at specifically here for this webinar where I'm at in terms of shoutcasting, and what that kind of entails as well. So typically in shoutcasting, you have your basic role is what your job is meant to be is you are supposed to be a storyteller, right? You are here to tell the story about what the game is and relay that to your audience, or the audience who is participating and watching alongside and wanting to watch this match with you. And when I say tell a story, I'm talking specifically about getting across the information to the viewer and presenting in a way that it matters to them. So it's not just about, so at a real basic level, I think what we're talking about is, yes, if you are calling the shots, you are calling the action, and you are telling the audience what is happening, you're maybe explaining things to them, but you're explaining things in a way that is both makes sense and also is interesting. Most importantly, is presented in a way that people care, and that comes through as basically a story that is being told, the story of a team coming through. How good is this team? Where have they come from? Why does it matter? Like, why do we want to care about this team's journey or this particular player's journey? Where are we in the tournament? What are we doing in this particular event, and why does any of this matter? And why does who wins or who loses kind of matter? And that is, I think, where people find the real magic of esports. When you're watching along, if you ever enjoyed an esports broadcast, if you ever really enjoyed a cast or a match, probably what you saw there is a almost, I wouldn't say invisible role, but at that point the casters, the broadcast talent, play a very secondary role in terms of elevating the actual match itself, so that you can get a feel for the, I guess, enjoyment of it, and you can get a feel for why any of this is potentially special, or why any of this could matter to you as someone watching the audience. Or at least that's kind of what I've always felt when, even watching as a fan, watching an esports broadcast and listening to the commentary, and why that sort of matters to me. So to get more in the nitty gritty about what happens in casting as well, typically there are two roles that you sort of play here. You definitely have a sort of play-by-play role where you kind of leading the broadcast a little bit. You could be hosting the other caster as well. You could be kind of like the primary caster here. You are in a position that you are mainly calling the plays. You are mainly calling the game in a more real-time sort of aspect. You are probably working alongside a color commentator. In this case, what a color commentator is someone who is able to bring the flavor or the analysis or the sort of things aside from the actual play of the game. So that's why we're kind of talking about color. We're talking about the colorfulness of the rest of the broadcast in terms of the personality, in terms of the auxiliary stuff, the peripheral stuff around the match. That's not just specifically what is happening in this match, but maybe why is it happening, or how is it happening, or what makes any of this interesting, or contextualizing these kind of things. And if you're working with other people in that broadcast as well, you could be working, like we sort of see on this screen here, a 3-man team where you have a play-by-play and 2 color commentators, or one of those could be a dedicated analyst as well. That's what some esports are doing now. So yeah, this is to basically show off the main course of the broadcast, being a caster, because this is what people are here to see. If you're watching an esports matchup, if you're watching sports at all, you are here to watch the actual game itself. So this is basically the people who facilitate and bring to you on the screen the main course of the production and the broadcast. You're here to call the play. You're feeding information to the audience. And that is the interaction that the audience gets to have with the broadcast itself, in terms of they get to receive the broadcast through the commentators. You are directing the viewers in terms of what is important, what they should be looking at. And in some sort of, in some ways as well, subconsciously, even how to be watching, how should you be watching this game or this matchup to get the most out of it. And otherwise, you're kind of just showing off the product. You're showing off the game itself. You're showing off why your sport or your esport is great, and what all the cool moments. You're here to highlight all the amazing things that happen, highlight all the signature plays and all the amazing moments. And for those to be memorable, that's where you get your highlights from. That's where people remember the special moments that happen, and the commentary that kind of goes along with it. So that is kind of like the broad strokes of broadcast commentary. Working on the actual esport broadcaster, like I sort of mentioned previously, it's definitely got a lot of moving parts. So that is what's happening in the front end of things, in terms of where casting is and what broadcast talent is doing. On the more back end side of things as well, it's kind of like working on a more linear television broadcast, or any sort of studio broadcast. If there's different levels to that. If you're a lot of esports, especially the esports you've probably seen, it's probably looking at through the lens of a studio broadcast, where you have people working in all sorts of positions. You are looking at production crews behind the scenes, in terms of directors, producers, audio engineers. It could be lighting people. It could be your floor manager. It could be camera operators. That could be in-game camera operations. We're talking about actual physical cameras as well, in terms of a set design as well. You are working with administration, content coordination, event operations, all sorts of different moving parts there. So you really are, in terms of working at a high level in esports on a broadcast, as broadcast talent, you are working among, a real broadcast crew, in some cases, people that have worked on linear broadcast, people that have worked in television or traditional sports as well. I've certainly had that experience in terms of working with people that have been very deep into traditional sports, and so there's definitely a very kind of professional and official way that things are done. And yeah, so being able to understand how that kind of works is, moving through the different phases of where you can be in broadcasting, because we kind of start out things where you could be in a bedroom broadcast, you could be broadcasting on the internet, you're probably working on something online, streaming out to Twitch, or it could be YouTube or something like that, and you're working towards then maybe into a studio broadcast where you're working with a production crew, you're working with a larger broadcast talent roster as well, to the point where you could be working in an arena or a stadium, like we started out with here when we're looking at the Melbourne Esports Open, where you have major live crowds, you have huge stage, huge production, you have a lot of staff there on site, a lot of moving parts as well. So you're working on a pretty major product there. It's kind of like working on a massive concert, or working on any massive show, any massive live show with a major audience aspect, with a major stage aspect as well. So there's different levels there in terms of where broadcasting can be and where shoutcasting takes place. So broadcast wise, there's definitely quite a lot there, and you can sort of see there as well in terms of the actual setup there. I mean, that's just one example. That is from DreamHack, and how much goes on there, how professional it is, how much equipment there is, and how many staff are actually working there, and in what kind of positions there are. But moving on, let's talk a little bit about where, how do people get started, and where do people go, and what it's kind of about from the perspective of someone trying to get through in terms of wanting to either start a career in casting, or they are currently in the middle of a career in casting. They like to progress from there, like how are we progressing through this one, to what the future looks like for you, or like where you can be going, and stuff like that. So like I mentioned earlier on, my personal experience was that I came from a player side of things. So I was a player first who competed and played with the team regularly. You might have seen on a webinar, you had Hey Katie on not that long ago. He's actually an ex-teammate of mine from 7, 8, 9 years ago. Maybe even up to a decade, actually. It's times been blink together. So Hey Katie is an ex-teammate of mine from up to a decade ago, and we played together in Team Fortress 2, and we were both players from there. And I started moving into broadcast commentary after a while, when people started approaching me to say, hey, you know a decent amount about this game. Would you like to come on a broadcast and talk about it? And did that, and it was pretty good. I felt like I was pretty decent at it as well. So kind of just moved on from there. So a lot of people do come from a player perspective. Some people come from a coaching perspective. But I mean, if you don't have any of that, that's fine as well. Again, the first thing you kind of need is you kind of need a love for the game. You kind of really need to enjoy esports. If you do not enjoy esports, this is probably not something you're going to get a lot of fulfillment out of, because this is a very long journey. It can be quite a difficult journey as well, and most likely to get to the stage where you can actually start to really see it as a career, where you can start getting payments and being paid for work, and have it as something that you can actually do as a job. That's probably, for most people, will take some time. So for the first stages, in your first decent while, could be years, could be shorter than that, could be longer than that, depending on where you are. If you don't really enjoy what you're doing, it's going to be difficult. It's basically very similar to a playing career, actually, in that case, in terms of trying to be a professional gamer, trying to be a pro level player. If you don't really enjoy what you're doing, if you don't love the game you're playing, if you don't have a competitive drive to be better and to be really good at what you're doing, you're not going to get to a stage where you get picked up for a professional team, or you're going to get paid a salary, or you're going to be doing any major tournaments or anything like that. Casting, I guess, follows a similar route to that, where if you're coming in from quite an amateur level, first of all, where you may be starting is, I really enjoy this game and I want to bring enjoyment to this game to other people at a more public kind of level. So that's, I guess, where the first step in shoutcasting, or just broadcasting and broadcast talent comes from, is you have a love for it and you want to bring it to other people. So then you may look to find a example of online matches. You can either grab a VOD or recording from YouTube. You can grab it from Twitch. You can sort of get that and cast over it. You can have a test of yourself. Just kind of mute it or put it to very low volume, and just have a go at it. Just have a go at talking over the game, and talk about, at the start of it, just, you don't have to do anything too special. You can even just think about, hey, what do I like about this game? What do I want to talk about? What do I think that is interesting that other people might want to listen to? Or what maybe do they want to hear about this? And sort of go from there. And you may do some recordings, listen back to them, look at them, see if you like them, see if there's something you'd like to do better about it. Do that a few times. Maybe you can find someone else. If you look online, you look through Discords, you look through Reddit or on Twitter or somewhere on social media where you can start connecting with other people. that have a similar interest to you. You can start working with them as well. You can grab something together, and you can both work on a practice cast over recording or a VOD together, and see if there's a bit of a connection there. See if you both enjoy that. Not that you need to be working with anyone early on. You can definitely do this on your own to start things out with. If you're getting a little bit more comfortable, you can start streaming this out publicly to people as well. So for now, if you're just starting out, you don't need to send this to anybody. You don't need to give this to anybody. You can just look at it yourself. Maybe you give it to some close friends and they can have a look at it and maybe they'll enjoy that. But if you get confident enough where you want to start showing it to people more publicly, stream it on YouTube, stream it on Twitch, make a Twitch account, and get into streaming. And streaming is not super tough to do for most people. You need some, basic computer equipment, a good internet connection, and you're basically ready to go from there. You don't even really need much else more than that. And start streaming out some casting. Maybe at this stage, you could still be grabbing a recording if you like, and streaming that out, and you're casting over that. Or you could be doing something like grabbing a live feed and kind of casting over that yourself, and you're not really streaming to many people at this stage anyway, so it doesn't really matter. You could also be uploading things to, for example, a YouTube account, your own recordings as well. So you could be casting on your own in your own time, and then uploading that later onto YouTube for other people to watch and get some feedback from the public, and really start to put yourself out there in the public, because getting some confidence in a public eye, I think, is a very important thing as well. So that will kind of get you started moving towards the next steps. And then once you start to get quite good at it, maybe you start to find you have quite a bit of skill in this area. Maybe you find someone else you work with, and the two of you, or maybe two or more of you, can start to find results together, and you guys are making some decent progress in terms of how you sound and how entertaining it sounds. And if people are really enjoying it, you can start getting to the stage where start contacting communities, start looking at where the communities are for the game that you like. There will always be communities, whether in Discords, again, look through social media, look through Discords, look through Twitter, look through Reddit, and see where these community tournaments are. And for the most part, these tournaments are not going to have broadcasting. There's no casters in these at all. And you can go up to them and you can speak to the organizer. You can say, hey, look, I'm an aspiring caster and I want to cast some of your games. And it doesn't need to be a big deal. It doesn't need to be, I'm going to stream this. It can be, if you want, you can talk to them about that. And if everyone's happy with it, that can be it. It can just be you want to cast it as practice. You just want to get into a live game, get into a lobby for a game that you want, a private lobby where an organized team is playing against another organized team at a community level or an amateur level, and you are joining there as an observer. You are watching the game and you're casting over the game, and that will give you some real good value in terms of casting over something that is live and something that is happening in front of you. And you're no longer just working off recordings anymore. Now this is the real cast. Now that you've done this, if you can do this step, you're getting into what is, basically real casting at this stage, because now you are presenting a live game. And then you can start to maybe think about doing that publicly as well. If you've already been streaming on Twitch or uploading your clips or your recordings, you can now do that for these live games, and you can start working with these communities to say, hey, this is content for you guys, so we can upload your VODs with casting on it, and that would be pretty high value for them. Maybe they would quite enjoy that. And you start working through these communities, start working through these tournaments into higher and higher level things. If you start getting again, your skill level is still increasing here. You're still feeling really good about this. You're noticing that you're getting quite good at this, and people are noticing that as well. They're giving you good feedback. You can start moving on to more and more tournaments, bigger and better tournaments. Now you're moving into larger community tournaments. You're getting into semi-professional tournaments, maybe, where it's probably not paid yet, if I'm going to be honest, but you're in a position where this is the step to getting into an actual career, because now you're doing some higher level things where people are going to start taking notice. And then from there, you then have the potential where if you are quite skilled and you're reasonably experienced, and you sound good and people like the product that you're putting out there, and you were confident on camera, you were confident on the microphone, then at that stage you have a real shot at maybe making it onto a professional broadcast or any sort of entry professional broadcast where it is paid. And it could be still online, it could be in a studio, it could be wherever, depending on what it is. And then once you're at that stage, the gate is open, the door is open, and you can suddenly get into the world of pro broadcasting. And now you can start to really consider making a real career out of it. And basically the sky is the limit from there. So things can get quite exciting once you've really put some real time into it, and the skill is there, the love for it is there. You got to love it. If you don't love it from the start, you're gonna really really dislike the grind that is associated with anything that you want to do well is going to have a big time commitment there. So be willing to put some real effort in. And if you have the perseverance to make it through, if you have the skill level to make it through, you can get to a stage where things can get quite interesting. And to sort of roll back a little bit just more in terms of what exactly you need to get started. So you don't need a lot. Obviously, you need a computer. Would be probably the minimum here. A computer that can play the game that you are obviously interested in casting. So you're going to need something that can do at least that. You are going to need at least a headset with a microphone, if not a any other sort of microphone. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need to be purchasing anything really expensive here. A basic headset with a microphone that works, that sounds reasonable. Doesn't need to sound the best. It needs to sound reasonable, and enough hardware capability that you can stream on Twitch or YouTube, or some ability to be able to, edit and upload onto YouTube. So maybe just a good enough internet speed where at minimum you can at least put up an upload in a reasonable amount of time. But preferably you have the kind of internet speed where you can maybe start streaming, and that would be ideal. So if you have those things together, then you can start getting into casting. You don't really need much more than that. And then beyond that, once you start getting into bigger events and more important events, then you can look at getting stuff like a webcam. You can start looking at, more of a proper microphone, something that is going to be a little bit more appropriate for broadcasting, something where you have, I don't know if you can see that, like that kind of microphone, like like a studio microphone. I've even got a green screen behind me. I specifically have chosen not to put anything on the green screen, so it is not like it's currently just a green screen. So that's something that, once you start getting a bit more serious into it, that's something that may help as well. You might want to look at lighting as well once you get more serious into it. And better and better cameras. At some stage, you might even want to upgrade outside of a webcam into a proper camera. I haven't even done that yet. I might be looking to do that soon. And yeah, other than that, I mean, equipment wise, it doesn't take a lot to start, and you don't need a lot to move through until you get to the stage where those things become relevant. Like I said, when you're learning a musical instrument, you are not buying the most expensive guitar to start with. You're just looking at something basic that you can learn from, and then as you start to get good, then you can look at things that are more appropriate for the level that you've begun to reach. But that is, in a nutshell, esports broadcasting and shoutcasting, a little bit of extras in terms of other broadcast roles and the esports broadcast itself. And well, Stephanie, I think we're ready for the Q&A.
All right, awesome. Let's go through some of the questions about casting. Okay, so Carbo Bear has asked, starting out...
I think you might be muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm muted for you. I wasn't for the stream. Okay, Carbo Bear has asked, starting out, do you recommend focusing on a single game or branching out? Or would that depend on which game and its complexity?
I would say focus on a single game starting out, and mostly that's because you want to just have something that you can work at and practice at over time. And so you want to keep things constant if possible. So this would be like a question where, hey, if I want to be a sports person, do I want to be playing 3 or 4 different sports, or should I just try and focus on one? And I'd say if you want to get serious about being good at something, you kind of just want to do one thing as much as you can rather than trying to be too spread out. If you have interest for other games and you are confident that that's not going to affect your progress, that's maybe something that you can do as well. But it kind of depends on like where your level is. Are you like starting out very fresh? If you're starting out very fresh, I would say definitely try and just focus on one game. But if you're getting to the stage where you feel like the game that you started out in, you're pretty good in, you know what you're doing in this game, and you want to start looking at other options, you want to bring other games in because you have interest in those other games, and that could help you find other opportunities, then that's when I would say look at other games as well.
Okay, awesome. You sort of spoke a little bit about starting out and things like that. What sort of budget might, someone be looking at to sort of get their first kit, so the headset and things like, how much would someone be looking at maybe to get some of that stuff?
You can get, well, the first thing you need as the minimum is you need a computer that can play the game that you have interest in, and also you want to have an internet connection that can, handle uploading and potentially streaming,
Hmm.
or even potentially like video editing and stuff like that. So if you can have that PC first, so you kind of want to have a, it could just be like maybe a laptop that can play games. Look, there are definitely games out there that don't require a lot. For example, if you're looking at a game like League of Legends, you don't need much to play that game. So the requirements might be quite low. But if you can get maybe like $1,000 or 1,000, like a $1,500 gaming PC, which can play most games, it can maybe play games that require a little bit more processing power. If you want to be looking at games like Modern Warfare or something like that that require a little bit more to play it, and you can't just play that on a basic PC, then you would need a slightly better PC. And then you're looking at other equipment like peripheral stuff. You're looking at, if you want to buy a headset, like a nice gaming headset is probably going to set you back a couple $100, maybe a few $100. But if you want just even a basic gaming headset, I would say that between $100, somewhere between $100 and $200 could definitely work for you if you can find a good deal under $100. If you're really strapped on cash, finding a good deal under $100 is very good as well. Again, it doesn't need to be like super fancy. You kind of just want something that works, has a reasonable microphone, and then as you progress, you don't think about upgrading later. You don't need the best thing to start with.
Okay. Cool. When you are starting out to cast a game, how much do you need to know about that game to cast it, or is that dependent again on the game?
It would help a lot if you know a decent amount. Being a caster, it's kind of like to really, you got to think about it. Who are the fans? Who are the people in the audience watching this? Why, what kind of people are they? They are probably people that have anywhere between a general interest to the game to being avid fans of the game who definitely know their thing. Because if you think about who is watching sports, people who are watching sports are, it could be someone who's just flipping through channels and they might see it. But for the most part, the sports fans are people that are really big fans of the sports, and they may go to the live games. They may watch the games quite regularly. They know what's going on. So you kind of want to be ideally on that same level where you want to know as much as a fan would typically know, as a baseline, and kind of go from there. So you kind of want to have the same kind of knowledge that a typical fan might have. So they know who these teams are, they know who these players are. You know as well. That's maybe looking a little bit more on the meta side outside the game itself. But in terms of the game itself, you play this game. You have played this game, and you currently still do play this game. You kind of know how this game operates in terms of the features of the game and how it plays, and more importantly, maybe at a competitive level, how do people compete in this game? What are the competitive rules in this game? And how that operates, and what are the sort of intricacies there. So if you have that to work with, then you can start maybe really getting into the broadcasting side, where you can start to show people those intricacies as well on the broadcast itself, because these are things that you want to be talking about, and you don't want to be caught in a situation where you don't really know the game too well and you're trying to figure it out while you're casting. That probably wouldn't be ideal.
Yeah, definitely. Carbo Bear has another question for us. They have asked, what importance do you put on maintaining a high rank or ability in the game of interest?
So that depends, because if you are starting out, again, this kind of even maybe connects to the previous question, because it's like, well, how much should I know about the game? And knowing about the game is kind of connected to potentially how good you are at the game. It's not always. It's also the case where you may not be particularly good at the game, but you still know a lot about it because you're a fan of it. Maybe you watch a lot of it. Maybe you consume a lot of the content, and you still play enough of the game that you know what you're doing. But being at a high level does allow you to sort of know more intricate things in terms of, typically, to be a high level of the game and to be quite good at the game, you need to know the game better than the average person by quite a bit. If you know the game better than the average person by quite a bit, then you are going to have access to information that normal people who are playing the game probably don't have access to, and those things will obviously be quite useful and be quite beneficial. It does have diminishing returns though, so I'd say that starting out, it's probably quite good. So this is why high-level players transitioning into broadcast talent, they have a lot to offer to start with, because they bring to the table all this extra knowledge that the average person doesn't know. But moving forward, I wouldn't say you need to particularly maintain a high rank or ability in the game. unless that's something that you are personally interested in, or unless that is something that you believe is the source of what you bring to the table or what your kind of niche is. For the most part, the people that are in broadcasting right now, myself included, like we're not really high rank in the games, but we have a wealth of knowledge in terms of what the competitive side of the game actually looks like. So for me, it's the toss up of, if I have 2 hours to spend on doing work outside of the actual cast of this game, am I spending that time trying to play and play at a high level, or would I rather watch over recordings, watch over VODs, watch over matches, and study those and do analysis there? And what's more useful? And typically, you'll find that the higher level the broadcaster is, and the more experienced the broadcaster, the less focus they have on playing the game, and the more focus they have on trying to understand the game at a professional level in terms of what the professional players are doing, and watching that footage and talking to the coaches and talking to the players and doing the work and the research on that side instead.
Yeah, interesting. How many different games do you cast?
Well, right now or like ever? Like
right now. Let's go with right now. And then I
Two.
guess you can tell us a little bit of games you have cast as well in the past.
Right now, just two. So right now it's just Overwatch and Valorant. But as I kind of mentioned in the intro, I've done Call of Duty, I've done Hearthstone, I've done Dota 2, I've done TF2, but a little bit of League of Legends. So that would probably cover most of them, yeah.
Done a fair amount there. You mentioned, okay, so you're currently doing Overwatch and Valorant. How easy is it to switch between casting one game to another? Do certain things kind of translate over? Is it just the skills of casting, and you've just kind of got to relearn a whole new game? How difficult is that transition?
You definitely have to relearn a whole new game every single time, unless it's like actually a sequel, or unless it's like a very connected game that is very similar to what you've done previously. But even then, there's a lot of new stuff there. Yeah, you have to learn a new game every single time. And even if it's something in the same genre, like trying to cast Dota and trying to cast League of Legends are two completely separate experiences. Those are very different games, even though they're in the same genre. They have just so much different things going on there. You have to understand. And I mean, this is exacerbated if you're trying to do it at a high level. It's more extreme in terms of, again, the expectations are higher at a high level, because the people you are casting, the people involved in these matches are such high level players that if you don't quite have the knowledge or the background that at least somewhat matches that, or at least, I'm not saying you have to be a pro player. Like, again, no high level caster right now is a pro player. They may be an ex-pro player, but they're retired, or they're no longer playing at their level. They're no longer there. But even then, beyond that, a lot of people, they're not even ex-pro players. So you don't have to be a pro player, but you have to understand what they're doing. You understand why they're doing that, and you have to understand the game at a level where you can sort of have an understanding of what is happening at a very high level. And that doesn't necessarily come from being the best player, but you learn these things, and these things are going to be different from the different games you play. The things that are going to be the same is esports is the same, like competition is the same, in terms of it will always be a team versus team or a player versus player, and the competition will typically be, the rules won't be that different in terms of, it will be, you have to eliminate the other team, or you have to score some points, stuff like that. So how the game sort of works in terms of a competition from a more meta perspective, that will just be the same no matter what. So you can always fall back on, I just know how competition works. But to actually bring to the table, why you're doing this game, and if you actually know anything about it at a more intricate level, then you have to really learn it.
Understandable. All right, social media. So we can see you've got your Twitter there underneath your name. So if anyone's wondering, that is at I'm AVRL. How important is social media for a caster? Do you need to have a social media presence? Is there any platforms that are best to use?
So you would want to have at least something there, because people need to contact you, and people are going to look you up to contact you. And this is not just for fans to follow you, but this is for if you're actually trying to get work. People need a way to be able to get in touch with you, and to be able to find you on the internet and send you a message, potentially, get in touch to present you with some work or talk about the possibility of work. So yeah, you want to have social media at minimum just for that, if nothing else. But obviously building a brand and being well known is part of it as well, because starting out, you're probably not going to be someone that's well known at all, unless you're someone that's already got a brand and you're transitioning into this role. then we're assuming that you don't currently have a brand. If you don't currently have a brand, it's going to be hard to get onto really good events, and it's going to be hard to get hired for anything because no one knows who you are yet. You need to build a portfolio. You need to build a history of work and be able to show that work, and then that'll be represented in your brand. That will be connected to your brand, and then when people look at your brand, they're going to be able to recognize the work that you've done in the past and what your history and your experience is going to be like. And these are all things that will hopefully be able to get someone hired if you have it. So having a brand for those purposes is really important. And other than that, brand, if you can get a really big brand and really do well in the brand, that can also just lead to alternative income sources and different opportunities outside of casting. Even you can just be broadcast talent in other areas. You can be having, you can have sponsors, you can represent other brands, you can do all sorts of things in esports that are even beyond the broadcast side of things if you have a decent brand. So everything kind of helps at the end of the day. A lot of people internationally will use Twitter, so that's probably a good one to have. Like I said, if you are wanting to broadcast your casting, which you probably do if you're starting out at some stage, you probably want to have a Twitch as well. If you want to upload your recordings, your VODs, so that people can see what your casting's like, you probably want to have a YouTube as well. So I would look at those things.
Okay, awesome. You mentioned there about like sort of having your brand and starting as a caster. So kind of, I guess, expanding on that, you've done those early things, you've done those, the YouTube and things like that. As you are growing as a commentator or caster, is there any sort of professional support out there that, will help people find work, help and develop and realize their skills a little bit? Like, how does that work, I guess?
Yeah, there is and there isn't. Kind of, it depends, because if you're at a professional level, I mean, people have talent agents that can help you find work and that can represent you and fight for contracts and stuff like that. So that can be quite helpful at a high level. But aside from that, if you're looking to start out, what you're probably looking for is more of a community where you have people that are open to, let's say if it's a community tournament, you have people that are open to having casting or to having people build the community with them in terms of broadcast or otherwise, or brand or socials, and that can be done through the casting, the broadcasting. You're looking to network with other casters where you can help each other out and work with each other, review each other, and improve together. You are looking for potential resources in terms of, maybe there are other casters that put out resources. Maybe there are organizations that have put out resources for you. Like, hey, think about these things. Red Eye is someone that has even got I think he's got an ebook on casting, which is really cool. So that's something that people might want to check out. And Red Eye is, I believe he owns his own esports talent agency, and he is a very well-known, well-regarded veteran of the esports scene, who has been in the space in a number of different roles, including broadcast talent, for very many years, and is like at the spear front of making sure that people spell esports correctly as well. So, so there's stuff like that, and then there's, if you get the chance to find, just communities of people who have these kind of interests, who can work together with you. Networking is going to be a big one, and you'll get through networking just by working with people. Like, that's the simplest way to network, is to be doing things where you're working with people, and then when you move on, you can talk to those people again. You can get to know what other people are working on, and introduce each other to other people that you can network with, and introduce each other to other events that you can work on, and meet other people and work with other people. There's no like real blueprint to casting. It's obviously everyone's journey is very different. My journey is going to be different from the other person, from the next person, and there's no like blueprint in terms of this is exactly how you go from A to B. In a lot of cases, it's actually kind of akin to like a music or acting career. I mean, but even those maybe have even a little bit more structure, because you can go to a music school, you can go to an acting school, but even then, like, once you progress out of there, you're kind of on your own, and you kind of need to just go to auditions. You kind of need to put yourself out there, and have people listen to your content or look at your content and want to engage with you off that.
Yeah, awesome. Now, I think that might be all the questions we have had this evening. I'm just going to have a quick look through. If anyone else in the chat has a last-minute question, do throw it in now. Oh, there is about a 20 to 30-second delay, so I'll give you a moment if you do have any last questions. While we're waiting for that, Avril, do you have any last thoughts or advice for anyone out there who is thinking about becoming a caster one day?
Yeah, look at what you think about why you want to do it. Is it something that, first of all, again, like I mentioned very early on, it's hopefully something that you just you have a real interest in the game itself. You have an interest in the esport. You have an interest in the game that you are doing. But then think about why you might want to do shoutcasting. Is it because it sounds like something interesting that you want to do? Is it because you were recommended to it by a friend? Is it because you saw an esports broadcast and you were quite inspired to want to do something like that? Is it because you really want to make a career out of it, or a number of different reasons? It could be multiple different reasons as well, but just remember why you want to do things. Remember what the source of motivation is, because that's going to be important to really get anywhere with it. You have to sort of be realistic as well about what you are actually wanting. So do you want to make a career? If that's the case, then what kind of steps are you prepared to make that happen? Because it's not going to be for everyone. Not everyone's going to be able to make it. I'm going to be a very specific example of, there's some major survivorship bias going on here where, look, you see me here, but you don't get to see the 100 people that didn't make it here that I've, known of, either worked with or known of, or worked alongside, even indirectly in the past over my time, So yeah, it's not everyone's gonna. It depends. Do you want to make it, or is it just is it a hobby? Like, what do you want? What are you trying to do? Why are you doing it, and how far do you want to go?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for the insights there, Avril. We will wrap it up there this evening, but thank you so much for the information you have shared tonight on shoutcasting.
Thank you very much.
For everyone, before I do say goodbye to Avril, if you would like to follow him and, keep up to date with his shoutcasting journey, make sure you go follow him on Twitter. It is at @IamAvril, and I follow him, and I think his stuff is great, so he's definitely a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for tonight, Avril.
Cheers.
Okay, and everybody else, thank you so much for coming this evening, for those who came to the webinar today, and a huge thank you to the South Australian Commissioner for Children and Young People and the Australian Esports League, for without either of them, tonight would not have happened. Now, we do have a form for feedback. If you do have a couple of moments to spare, we'd love your feedback on tonight. We're going to drop the form now in the chat, so, if you have some time, click on that for us and just give us a little bit of feedback from this evening. I hope you have all found tonight beneficial and perhaps learned something new in the world of esports and shoutcasting. Until we see you all next time, which we do have a webinar next week, so make sure you come and tune in for that one. Thank you and good night, everyone.